little tip for you there. Right. Okay. So let's get the panel up. We've already got Lara. So let me invite Dan and Alex on stage. So our panel today are Lara Courts, who is Chief Data Officer at Azure, Alex Last, Continuous Improvement and Automation Manager at Zurich, and Dan Klein, Director of Solution Center at Zulka Engineering. Hello, everybody, and welcome.
Afternoon.
Good. Good to see you all. Right. Okay, let's get going. So I'm going to introduce the first poll to kick us off, and then I'm going to come to Laura to just comment on that and lead us into the first part of our discussion. So what I'd like to know is, how mature is your data strategy? So some answers there. If your answer isn't there, you can put it in the chat. Here's 10 seconds on the clock. That's pretty positive. We have a strategy and a plan. 25%. That's good. Why are you all here? You could be on the panel and help us with ours. But so yeah, majority of people still developing a strategy or still auditing data as well. So fairly early stages for the majority of people. And perhaps Laura, you might want to reflect on that poll when I ask you the first of our kind of discussion questions. And what I want to start with really is, what do we consider to be a data-driven organization? So in your organization, how's that play out?
So we're an InsurTech, and we have different levels of maturing data. We have some legacy business, but we're also building new product on new tech in a Salesforce environment. So we have the luck that we can then build a data strategy out for new product in this environment, in an ecosystem. So I think for us as this InsurTech, we have kind of three strands, the way that we look at data and how we drive that. So I kind of think of it as the first strand is what the data that's coming into the business. So partnering with third-party enrichment companies, allowing us to do short-form underwriting, reducing the question sets, improving the user experience for the brokers. We don't deal direct to consumers, we deal directly with brokers. So it's in creating that better UX for them. And it also gives us competitive advantage because we have that data that's coming in, and we can improve our pricing variables in that way. So that's the data coming into the business. And then the second part is actually, what do we do with that data? We've actually partnered with a data science company, and we are using that data in different ways to allow us to do some real-time predictive scoring. So it allows the underwriters to have augmented underwriting, as we call it, which gives them a bit of guidance on that risk, how that risk will impact on the portfolio, how they can adjust that risk to allow them to give us better results at the back end, improving our loss ratios. And then on the third part is the data that then moves out of the business. So looking into the analytics and the insights that you can get from that data. So looking at conversion, looking at the way that we can work with the brokers, a real-time view of that portfolio. So if we want to change the underwriting appetite, we can do that. It allows us to automate some of the lower value risks and freeing up the staff that then can drive the underwriting on the more complex risks, and drive the sales team to have conversations with the brokers. So it's really, the data is really embedded in the way of working. It's really embedded in the culture, very dynamic and evolving. And it kind of moves away from the underwriting team and the sales team having to pull data themselves from different areas of business, because it's all joined up, it's all in one place. And that data flows through from that quote and bind all the way through the business to the analytics and the insight, which is all joined up in one place. So it's kind of really empowers them, and it allows us to flush out any of those worst performing brokers or those segments of the book that we want to look at in more detail, and allows us to have that real, the data really is what flows through the whole of the business and allows us to have that insight. That's kind of how we look at it from our business. But obviously we still have legacy business as well, and that has to be pulled and have the issues of different data on different systems, such as claims in one place, policies in another. There's no one-to-one relationship. So I have the issues of this legacy data and then the kind of the way that the world needs to be in the future.
Yeah. I think we'll get into challenges later, but
Yeah.
Dan, I could see you smiling then when Laura was talking about the flow of data, and I think that's something that we were chatting about just before we came on.
Yeah, I mean, like Laura's an InsurTech, so she's in some senses she's got a jump start here, right? And she spot on in terms of like you data has to become the thing that everybody goes to within the business for making decisions. My test actually in this space, and it's not just specific to insurance industries, but it applies to insurance industries, is when I talk to a strategy team, let's say, director of strategy for a big insurance company. If they're not using the data internally from their organization, they're not a data-driven organization. And they'll probably use, for things like the cost ratios and that sort of stuff, they might use their finance data, but they won't be using the data from the tech typically. They'll be going and buying the data externally and then writing a strategy for the business based on externally bought data, which I just think is bonkers. So my view of how far should you go, strategy teams need to be able to use the data that is provided by the organization. And actually that is true across the whole organization. Everybody should be making decisions based on this data being made available. And Lara's spot on, it needs to be basically timely, right? So as near real time as you can make it. Otherwise, these, one of the problems with legacy finance systems is they're typically monthly reporting. So, again, a question for the strategy team. You're already looking at data that's a month out of date, right? So what are you doing as a business to be on top of the timeliness of your data, on top of your, as Lara says, the brokers, which ones are performing, not performing in real time? That's important. If you can't sit on top of that stuff, you're not a data-driven organization.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the areas we've seen with the collaboration. We built a system which allows the data to flow through directly into the broker invoicing. And then we realised, the finance have different uses of the data to what I do in terms of analytics and insight. And a lot of the time, the finance systems sort of cut the data off. You don't need all of it for finance, you only need part of it. But you need to still be able to dive into that data in the ways that you want to and slice and dice it in the segments that you need. So it has to be able to flow into that finance system in the same way, rather than having to kind of recreate something new for it to flow into that finance system. So it's collaborating with all areas of business and all the people that will have to use the data, because the data is a data right at the end of the day, and you want it to be joined up. Which I think is, when we come to challenges, is something that we can talk about in legacy versus what we kind of create in the new data-driven world.
Yeah, and if I just add, I'm just going to add to Lara, I'm just going to add to that, because actually you touched on something else which we should probably talk about, which is I'm not a great fan of data quality and cleaning data up, for precisely the reason that Lara's just explained, actually. You don't want to discard data. You might want to present it in a different way, and you might want to present it with a level of efficacy that's been added to it, but you still want to be able to go back to the raw data. So what Lara's just explained, which is finance, well, they discard a load of it. No, it's not about discarding it. It's about giving a view to finance, which is the subset that they need.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
You've got to hold on to the raw data, because the raw data might be seriously valuable to the underwriters in a completely different context. And this idea that you sort of clean data up and get rid of all the interesting stuff. So as data scientists, we would say, well, you want to access the interesting stuff, right? You don't want to clean it out so that you can't see it anymore. So it's all about different views on this data that's moving around an organization. And it's not about it being static either. So it is about the flow. As Lara says, it's about that near-time flow of timely data for the people that want to use it in a way they want to use it, not, it's got to go in this particular pre-canned way and this is how it is, kind of thing.
Yeah, and another thing is that we built it's a very much as in the Salesforce ecosystem, the new products that we build, which is very much API driven. So we're working with data partners to bring in, this is high net worth home insurance. So we're bringing in lots of property data points, and most of those drive pricing and become part of what the actuarial rate analysis is. But there are also some factors that don't yet drive pricing, but they could potentially. So we are still capturing those. We're still putting those in our data, and we're capturing them as a field, and allows us to monitor those and assess those and see how valuable they become, and then they become rated part of the rating model. So it's kind of sort of future-proofing the data, so allowing us then to use the data in the future, hopefully, for pricing or analytics, which again gives us that differentiation amongst our competitors.
I'm going to ask Alex to jump in and give us kind of a view from a big established insurer. What's your take on?
I mean, a lot of the themes that's been mentioned so far is very familiar to an incumbent insurer, right? We've got a lot of legacy, and we've got all these opportunities and challenges. And what I would say is the one thing I think resonated with me, which Lara mentioned, was about culture. Because anyone, what with the advent of Power Apps and spreadsheets, anyone can be a data custodian. Anyone can hold on to, curate, and lovingly look after their data. But actually, what are they driving from it, and what is the meaning, and what are they doing with it? And I think from a Zurich perspective, we've been on the journey, which sounds cliche, but we have for the last couple of years, where we're looking to educate from the top to the bottom in terms of the importance of data, from the person who is doing the data entry, capturing the clients or the claimant's information, all the way through to the actuaries and the likes, to make sure that they have a role to play and they understand just how important they are. But also, it's not just that, it's also to do with ethics and bias. So if we're using this data, and we're now starting to tap into that, and some things we'll talk about very soon, we've done put into place certain measures and metrics to make sure that we are processing fairly, and we're also processing as much as we can without bias. And the cultural element for me is really, really important. If you get the technology correct and you understand the data, and you've got all of your cleansed or uncleansed, structured or unstructured, you're starting to drive meaningful output. You've got to make sure the culture is where it needs to be in order to make sure there's a good customer outcome, but also you're driving the organization forward, because choosing the wrong data set and interpreting it incorrectly could be as disastrous for an organization that could be for a customer outcome. So I think the culture is really, really quite central for me.
And that actually brings us on to our next question. I'm going to throw this to Dan, if I could start off with, which is around how insurers can reimagine the customer experience through data available on insurable assets. So yeah, perhaps you could kick this section off for us.
So I think, I'm going to be slightly provocative, and there are some really interesting insurtechs floating around that are starting to challenge this. And actually some of the incumbents are doing, they've got small proof of concepts floating around as well. But the thing that the insurance industry has traditionally struggled with, the idea that they only engage with customers twice, when the customer buys the insurance and when the customer claims. And frankly, as it's a utility, and therefore it's seen as a pain by pretty much any customer, business or consumer. And actually the challenge for the insurance industry is to think about how do you reimagine that customer engagement in such a way that two things happen. One is you get a feed of data about what the customer is interested in, what they're doing, that relates to your insurance policy. I'm not talking about collecting data on lots of things. And IoT devices absolutely have a part to play in that. Whether that's an IoT device in a commercial property that's measuring the maintenance state of the property, or whether it's an IoT device.
Oh, we lost one. Oh no, you're back. No, carry on, Dan. I lost you for a second.
Okay, weird. The other side of that is then what do you do with it? So how do you nudge the behaviour with the consumer or with the maintenance of a big commercial estate to say, well, there's some things we're seeing that might improve how you mitigate the risk, right? So then this is about insurance companies reimagining themselves in terms of getting more involved in helping customers mitigate risk in near real time, and using that feed as a way of understanding how they can improve the customer experience and touch points through the journey. So, you know, talking to a syndicate in Lloyd's, for example, at the moment, about the idea of how do they nudge ship captains' behaviours as they traverse the northern route across the Arctic, because there's a set of data there that matters in terms of managing risk. But actually, it's about taking insurance companies back to this idea of that they are as involved in mitigating the risk as the organisational person they're insuring. And that's the challenge for the industry, because if the industry rises to that challenge, it's all about the change of customer experience at the end of the day, and about mitigating risk and managing loss, right? And that's the thing that's going to change the cost ratios, frankly, at the end of the day. And if the big incumbents don't do it, the insurtech sure as hell will as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's all about the risk prevention and the risk management. We have some ultra high net worth individuals, and as part of their policy, for example, we give them family protection. We have risk security officers go out and look at their habits, the way that their art's hung on the walls, talking about fire plans. If there's a fire, how to take out the most expensive pieces of art, and what would be the way to reduce the losses on that particular policy in the event of a really unfortunate loss. How to protect their family, cyber security and security measures taken around the family. So it's all about preventing those risks, those claims from happening in the first place, and making the clients more comfortable and protected by the insurance, rather than picking up the losses at the back end.
And actually, if I add to this, because just to go back to the cultural discussion, actually, so there's a really interesting discussion around, well, are you comfortable collecting all this data on your customers? GDPR, no, not an issue at all, because most customers, young drivers, are a really good example, actually. If you say to a young driver, if you can give us all this access to your data, we're going to enable you to reduce your premiums because we're going to see you're a safe driver. They'll give you all their data. Of course they will, because they see value at the other side of it. You have to use it for what you've said you're going to use it for. But if you create a value equation with the consumer which says, if you give us more access to what you are doing and how you are driving, we are going to see that as a way of reducing your premium, or because we're helping you mitigate how you're driving and we're helping you think it through. The value equation is there for the consumer. And that is true. My thesis is that is true across the whole industry. If you say to shipping companies, well, actually, there's a way of, as we're doing with the Northern Route, if there's a way of helping it, they'll get involved. They'll give you access to the data feeds if what it does is help mitigate the risk of their ships.
And I think from my perspective, so once you've got the access to the data and you're comfortable, what you're doing with it, it's really about then how do you loop that back into the customer journey. And I think, Jeremy, to your question, so recently in Zurich, UK, we've had a couple of good use cases where we have tried to remove, where possible, silo working, because as I mentioned, people love to curate and look after their own data. It's my data, go away, we know what we're doing. And that's not a difficult task to overcome. But what we'll say is a couple of examples where we've used our customer function, which listen and feedback following CSAT, customer satisfaction, and RMPS. Is fed then into our data scientists, who will then understand, look at trends. They've got the structured data from our data teams, and then they'll then feed that into my area, which is then continuous improvement and automation, where we'll use some internal consultancy, and perhaps the end result is a better, swifter, much more cleaner customer journey. So I'm not saying that's on every opportunity, but what we're starting to do, at least in Zurich, is start to use and leverage the skill sets and the knowledge, and we don't have them, build them, to have a much more better understanding using our end-to-end with the resources we've got. We've got the skill sets. It's overcoming, for me, the ownership of the data to make sure it's readily available in a safe, standardized way that actually we can all make sense, but all reading from the same source of truth. And I'm not saying we've cracked it, but what I am saying is we're starting to use that collaboration to not just a better commercial outcome, right? At the end of the day, we're all trying to make money, but also for better customer experience. So parts which Lara mentioned about risk mitigation, risk insight, and all that has got to come from collaboration.
Can I just ask a quick question, actually, with Zurich? in your CSAT stuff, are you also taking the feed that comes from the usage of the website and the mobile apps?
Indeed, yes. So we're quite fortunate in the last couple of years. We have centralized our customer functions. So we do take the source data from websites, telephony where possible, text message, other inputs or data feeds. And you make sense of that as much as we possibly can in terms of aligning and making sure that we're hearing what the customer's saying. And it's fed back into each of our operational areas on a regular basis. In fact, we are incentivized as a UK group to improve upon those year upon year. So it's going back to culture. It's a culture of understanding, listening, using the data for meaningful outcome, not just ticking the box and saying that we have captured it. And that's really, really important, but it's not easy to do. It's a lot of investment and a lot of time. And unfortunately, a lot of incumbents don't have the time and an awful lot of investments needed for their legacy. But I guess we'll talk about the challenges in a moment.
Yeah. So we spent this morning talking about personalization and risk mitigation, and I put up a poll earlier today which just asked people where they were spending their kind of investment bucks on innovation, and one of the options was parametric insurance, and there was I think there was one person that answered that's where they were putting money into that area, and it feels to me that it's a cutting, and so we had a discussion about it, and it feels to me that that's such a cutting edge, risk mitigation or parametric insurance seems to be so far away for many people. I just wonder, what does the journey look like from getting from where we are now to this state where we have this data, we're able to offer personalized service or mitigate risks in real time? How far away are we?
Well, I'm actually going to touch on what Alex has just said. Actually, going to almost bring Alex back into this because, the continuous improvement of your organisation and the automation of claims, for instance. I mean, what's parametric insurance in a day? It's just a mechanism for automating claims. Sorry to be blunt, right? But actually, it's only a subset of how you think about automation of claim. So, for example, again, if you, sorry to bang on about young drivers, but it's a good example of IoT devices. There are insurance products out there that in the event of a crash, the automated claim happens within a minute of the crash because the data has come off the IoT device. They've captured the 10 seconds in the run up to the crash. They fed it. They know exactly where the claim lay, where the parties lay. And by the way, with the other insurance company on the other side of the claim, they can just send the data to them. Job done, right? So it's all about thinking through how do I make use of devices, including the mobile phone, and how do I think about automating the processes around claim? And parametric is just one mechanism for doing that. It happens to be an external feed where you say, right, well, in the event of a natural disaster, automatic payout. Okay, it's not very difficult. And the challenge is most organizations aren't set up to receive the data in a timely way because, as Alex says, they've got lots of legacy systems floating around. If you can't receive that data in a timely way and you can't use it in a timely way, you haven't got a hope of trying to do automated claim because it's just something that just gets lost in the noise and you end up spending weeks trying to sort through it. So on that journey, the challenge for the incumbent industry, and Lara is a really good example of this, is the incumbent industry needs to work out how to sort out its legacy tech fairly quickly, because if they don't, organizations like Lara's and others, and a lot of these insurtechs that are coming in with IoT devices, are just going to clean up. And that's the challenge.
So that segues nicely into our next area of discussion, where we're going to talk about some of the challenges in a bit more detail. We've already touched on some of them already, but Ellie, perhaps you can put the next poll up just to ask, what is the biggest data challenge that you've got in your organization? There's a few answers there. Anything else, write it in the chat. Here's 10 seconds on the clock. So, this is spread really quality, accessibility, compatibility. I guess legacy technology has got to be in there anyway, as you've just touched on, Dan. And yeah, legacy tech in the chat from Ian there. So perhaps I'm going to fire this one at you, Laura, if I could, just to kick things off. I think you've already mentioned a couple of the challenges that you've got in terms of the legacy side of your business, but perhaps you just want to pick it up and then we'll dive into it with the rest of us.
Yeah, so I think I kind of had a little think about this from both sides. You've got the legacy side, and then you've got the sort of the new world as well, in the insurtech world, and bringing the data all in one place. So I think from the legacy side, I think it's everything that everyone knows. It's the architecture of the data, how it doesn't flow between the finance system, the claim system, the policy underwriting system. How you try to bring that all together, be that in a data lake or some sort of data warehouse, or however the data can join up, where it's a one-to-one relationship and allows you to get that insight and that real-time information that's usually not real-time, to be honest. And how you can then ensure that your stakeholders and actuaries, and it's all those things we spoke about, making sure the data entry people understand what that impact is on the data as it has to be used at the back end. So I think that's kind of a real issue, and I think that's one that's kind of recognised. But one of the ones, and one of the ones I think is another thing that we have experienced as an insurtech and trying to use data in more different ways, is the fact that there's lots of people out there now trying to sell data into the insurance industry and navigating between what's real and what's not real, and how can that be custom made and make that fit for purpose. So trying to really understand the value in that data and how you can get the insights from that data. So, for example, we use property data factors because we write home insurance, and there's not 100% coverage of the country. If we want to have an API that feeds the quote process, then we need to have that. So it's trying to understand what's modelled versus non-modelled, and then a way to take that non-modelled, which we do have, and applying a confidence score around it. So we can then build that into the rating factor to say, okay, this is a modelled factor rather than a non-modelled one, and then that would then impact on the pricing. And, there's lots of vast data out there. It's very messy. We don't have the skills to bring that data together, to clean that data up, and to be able to use it so it's valuable for us and usable. So that's just a couple of the examples that I thought would be worth raising.
Thanks. Alex, do you want to come in just to?
I think from a large insurer's perspective, I mean, Zurich have been around for over 100 years. With that comes quite a lot of acquisitions and consolidations and legacy and books of business. And what I'll say is it's something which has been a focus for us, as long as I can remember working in this organisation now for good nearly 16 plus years. And what I'll say is we're on that journey to try and centralize and make sense of what we have, and we've made some good progress in the last couple of years, to the point where actually it does pay off, in as much as, I'm not sure if anyone's heard a little thing called Brexit, but that's caused a lot of challenge for a lot of people in all facets and backgrounds of life. And insurers are no different, because we've got to be able to support our customers wherever they are in the world if we're a global insurer. But also, more practically, we've got to then be able to make sure that we are a Swiss company who are regulated by an Irish corporation or banking background who are operating out of the UK. So all of those things are complex, and all those things mean that us as an insurance company and an insurer need to respond to regulatory change pretty quick. And we're starting to do that now that we've got some sense and structure to our data, but we are not quite there. And this will be an ongoing exercise, and it hasn't required an awful lot of investment. But what we'll say is we're starting very slow to see the fruits of our labour, for sure.
Thanks, Alex. Dan, what do you see when you work with clients?
Actually, I was going to pick up on something Laura said.
Sure.
When Laura talks about APIs, that's super happy. Super happy, Dan. Super unhappy, Dan, is when Laura talks about data warehouses. Because frankly, my view of data warehouses is a lipstick on a... the fundamental problem is if I cannot put an API on top of an old legacy bit of kit, probably because you break the legacy bit of kit with the servicing of that API request. The idea that you then export that data into a data warehouse to be the thing that then services that API creates a loss of time. And I can't express how fundamental that is to this. So I hate data warehouses with a passion because they are.
No, I agree.
You agree with me? Yeah, they're lipstick on a pig. What you're basically saying is we're not getting rid of our legacy tech, so we're going to put a kludge in, which is called a data warehouse, where I give myself a bit of time to extract the data from the old legacy system and shove it into something that can handle an API request. Now, that means once, I always talk about the Back to Future moment, Michael J. Fox. Once I've lost that time, and it may be I've lost 6 hours because it's taken me 6 hours to extract the data into a data warehouse, I can't get it back. So if you as an organization are then trying to use that data in near real time with your customers online in whatever form, you'll never do it because you've already lost that 6 hours. You're never going to get it back. And there has to be a really big wake up moment for the industry. Data warehouses are not the answer. The answer is to go and spend the money changing the old legacy tech. Because if you don't, you won't be timely, and your customers are all now real time. They're all operating on their mobiles or on the web. Even the big corporates are operating basically in near real time these days. So the insurance industry has to get rid of that legacy tech. And data warehouses are not the answer. The answer is, can I have an API that allows me to move the data around? And Lara's spot on. I need to be able to link the data together across multiple APIs. I need to be able to key the data. I need to know what the models are so I can key it. But I need to be able to key the data in basically near real time so I can answer a question either for an internal team, if I'm doing a process improvement, if I'm in Alex's shoes doing a process improvement, or for a customer who wants a particular experience at that particular moment in time when they're online. So that's the real challenge. And honestly, to come to your question, structured and unstructured, it has to be both. And you have to have, and this is actually to Alex's conversation about culture, it's really interesting. Insurance companies are going to have to create a culture where they have people within their teams who understand how to use structured data and people who understand how to use unstructured data. And they're going to be able to provide data to each other. And it has to be something that just is part of what you do, okay? And I don't see it yet. I see it with some pockets, which is amazing, but
Dan, a question if I may. So coming from a very rich legacy infrastructure background, such as ours and our peers, there's been lots of talk over the last couple of years about emerging insurtechs, disruptors, and I don't actually feel that. I see them as collaborators and enablers. Mm-hmm. But how far off do you believe we are in terms of seeing where insurers will be on the back foot and overtaken by perhaps emerging competitors? And when should they, apart from now, when should they start to wake up and start investing quite heavily in getting off that?
Yeah, interesting question. So the early warning shots are, of course, the insurtechs. And I see there's a question in the chat about IoT being talked about for years. IoT is here to stay, and it's already in the insurtechs, and it's with some of the big insurers as well. Watching Google launch an insurance product. Oh, if that's not a wake-up call to the industry. So in my history, I landed up doing a 6-month piece of work for Google about 8 years ago. I can tell you culturally, everybody from the top of the organization down looks at their own internal data. They've got it all, and they really look at it. And I think also, if you look at Google's history, I would say to the industry, if you look at the relationship they've had with Caitlin Insurance for many years now, be very scared. They were mapping, Google made a big thing a number of years ago now about doing street view in the Great Barrier Reef underwater, where they were sending ROVs to take pictures of the underwater. It was all very sexy, and everybody went, oh, very sexy. Scratch the surface of that project and you discover it's being done with Caitlin Insurance, and Google are very clear why they're doing it, because they have now got the best data set of the seafloor on the planet, and anybody who wants to do any mining whatsoever is going to have to talk to Google to get the data. And they're going to be the ones that insure it because they understand the risk of the seafloor. So it's almost Google is going to creep up on everybody, suddenly launch into the market. Everybody's going to go, what happened? And you were like, well, you missed that one, didn't you? And this is the point, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's been here for some time. Has the legacy industry worked out that it's already here? Probably not, question mark.
Yeah, I think it's this data enrichment, is partnering with the people that are doing the work, like you say, to enrich the data, to be able to bring it in, and where the APIs come in, to really feed that, to differentiate. I think that's going to be the one, and people are already doing that. People are already taking data, already like consuming that data. But there is a lot more data out there that's available, and a lot of stuff that's not necessarily always been related to the insurance industry is now becoming something that can then be, for example, we have a data set that's from related to planning. So people having planning permission on their property, that data set's now feeding into some of our variables. And it was built for the construction industry to be able to know when they could go and tender to these business. It's now being consumed by our API to help us with some of our property variables. And it kind of, the data's been used in different ways, and they're not realising that the value that's in those data sets and that can actually impact on the underwriting process.
Yeah,
I agree with Lara, and not to give too much away, but our data scientists are fantastic, intelligent people, as they always are, and we're using open sourced unstructured data to be able to help to improve our risks and to make more meaningful decisions at a pricing, but also an underwriting perspective, but also claims. So the data is there. It's just making sure that we know we have the smart people in place, and culturally we value the data. And I think that's another point I wanted to get across today, was there's a culture element, but also there's the value. Yeah. I'm not quite sure if everyone's quite cottoned on to just how rich they are or what they're sitting on, because that's quite the asset. I'm not quite comfortable that people quite appreciate.
So Alex, I couldn't agree with you more on that. That this is one of the crazy things. The big insurers, the big legacy insurers, are sitting on the crown jewels, and they don't understand what they're sitting on culturally at the top of the organisation, I would argue. I'm also minded, there's a question here that's related actually from Oscar about fully automated underwriting or claims. The answer is no. You're never going to have fully automated. You're going to have partial automation, i.e. What I would call run-of-the-mill underwriting, run-of-the-mill claims probably is going to be automated if it's not already. The question is, there's always going to be sort of edge cases where you're going to need a human. And all this talk about AI and machine learning and all that great stuff, it's great, it's amazing, and we build stuff regularly for customers. But when you get stuff that doesn't fall into the bit that the computer's been trained for, guess what? You need a human. So I'm not sure we'll ever see completely automated anything in this space. Will we see 98, 99% automation? Probably. But there's always going to be a human element in the loop.
You're going to create operational efficiencies, aren't you? So that you can create those operational efficiencies and allows the underwriters to focus on their complex and more difficult stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, but I just wanted to ask this question. You touched on it, Lara and Alex, just what you're doing in terms of enabling automation and augmented underwriting. I just wanted to give you the opportunity just to explain a little bit more about that. So, Laura, do you want to talk about the augmented underwriting and how that works?
Yeah, how that's worked, we've partnered with a data science company, and we created some models looking at the likelihood to convert and the likelihood to claim, creating two scores, which are shown to the underwriter at the time of a quote. So all the quote details are sent to our data science platform, which returns these scores, which the underwriter sees real time. And it helps them make a decision on that policy, on its likelihood to convert and its likelihood to claim. So how good that policy could be against that portfolio. And the ones that fall within our sweet spot, they could then take some adjustment to the policy to try and win that business, which again at the back end is tilting our portfolio to become a better portfolio and to improve the loss ratio. And it's working really well. And it's great. We went through some challenges getting the data, again, because it came from some of our legacy systems. And then as we build new products, that data will just flow through to those. So it's going to become much easier as we move towards new products in the future, because the data is clean enough just to flow all the way through that data science platform and then back out. yeah, it's really good.
Great. And Alex, in terms of the work that you're doing, Zurich enabling automation, what have you seen?
Yeah, so I drew reference to our data scientists working on it's an address matching solution, but it's far more richer and intelligent than that when you start to then match and attach your own data sets. And operationally speaking, we'll talk about operational efficiencies. We've reduced what can be a couple of hours worth per case or activity to down to mere seconds. So you do have the operational benefits, but you also have the quicker turnaround time. And as we know, our clients, partners, and brokers, they require a quick turnaround time if you're a tender or if you're looking for any other part of the process. So to be able to turn that around and to make a robust decision and to add value back into the process is phenomenal. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, you would be labelled with a large footfall and workforce having to work through that and delays or missing deadlines. We're now managed to do that in the blink of an eye. And you can only do that with the upfront investment and structured data. And to Lara's point, so it has taken us some time, but as we onboard new systems, new products, new processes, they'll only benefit from that hard work up front. The challenge that we have is that some of this data we don't own. And so we are tapping into external open source, and of course they are open to regular change or updates, but that's why you have a dedicated data science and predictive analytics team as such as we do. But we are starting to see the real benefits, not just an operational perspective, of course, but you then drive those improvements back to the customer experience. So more time with the customers, more time with the brokers, and of course a quicker turnaround time. Everyone's happy.
Great. Excellent. We are out of time. As always, the time flies, and we could carry on talking for ages. But I'd just like to say thank you very much to Lara, Dan, and Alex for a really great conversation and discussion. I hope everyone enjoyed that. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we're just going to finish this session off with a short one of our exhibitor insights films. If you missed it earlier, it's from DockerSoft. So I'm going to play that out now, and then I'll look forward to seeing you at the next session at 4:00. Thanks very much.
DockerSoft is an insurance technology solutions company, and we develop and support enterprise claims management systems that is used by some of the top insurance companies in the world to manage their claims. Our claims systems are core to the operation of these companies. We're the #1 supplier of core claims management systems into Lloyd's of London, with nearly 20 of the 50 insurance syndicates using our claims system. Currently, over 50% of all claims messages going into the London market will go through a DockerSoft claims system, and we're managing over £15 billion worth of premium risk. Our primary aim is to assist our insurance carriers in assisting their clients in recovering from loss. Our award-winning systems provide a seamless interface for claims handlers and underwriters, and we unify claims data, policy information, documents, and syndicate claims messages. Claims are the shop front of any insurance organization, and it is vital that our systems manage the messages and stay live. And insurance companies' whole brand is influenced by their customers' claims experience. We were formed in 1997, and we have a unique hybrid Irish, English, and Japanese culture.
At DockerSoft, we believe in creating handcraft solutions for our client community. So first of all, the solution has to work. It has to be grounded in a workable reality that delivers tangible and measurable benefits to clients. We go much deeper than a traditional vendor-client relationship. We want to work in partnership with our clients. We appreciate that our solution lies at the heart of our clients' core offerings to their customers, all of them recognising the need to ensure their claims are agreed and efficiently paid. Our clients trust us to make sure that their systems are still standing no matter what the situation, and that is a fundamental part of our continuing success. DocuSoft's claims management system delivers efficiencies, enhances service and improves controls. The DocuSoft CMS has helped some clients turn claims around in nearly half the time they did before. And in the market where so-called big ticket claims will run into multi-million-dollar payouts, that is vital and reputations are enhanced. DocuSoft's transition to becoming a software developer that goes toe-to-toe on a weekly basis with some of the world's biggest software developers has been remarkably smooth. Our competition is relentless and highly motivated, which means we have to be on our toes to keep ahead of them. Indeed, the expansion of our client base is significant, requiring us to recruit in excess of 20% new experienced staff in the last year alone. We remain nimble, sure of foot, swift and flexible, but just as important is that we're committed to building products of enduring worth and excellence.
The need for advanced claims management systems and innovative analytic solutions has been driven by globalized competition, data overload, more stringent risk and compliance requirements, new regulations and changing customer behaviours. They recognise claims as a key part of the customer experience, requiring 24/7 access so they can react to world events and manage resources wherever they are. Many London market claims teams are therefore turning to technology solutions to gain insights, automate processes and enhance performance. Meanwhile, outdated market-wide claims technology systems continue to hold back those London market carriers that have not moved into the post-ECF world, ushered in by fintech innovators such as DocuSoft. DocuSoft's claims management system affords carriers the functionality to review and respond to a claim in their claim hub without recourse to the two market claim systems, electronic claims file, ECF, and the insurer's market repository, the IMR. The document CMS is a one-stop shop, a hub. The system's multi-system functionality is able to seamlessly interface with claims data, policy information, documents and syndicate claim messages. Lloyd's minimum standards require that managing agents have effective systems and controls to audit and review presented claims for each managed syndicate. So the current CMS system has a bespoke built-in peer review, conduct risk and sanctions capability. And whilst the minimum standards are predominantly Lloyd's focused, they do equally apply to the company and non-bureau market who have been operating in that same manner over a number of years. We are agnostic to the policy admin system, so there's no need to dramatically change your policy admin system. It's flexible to work with your existing system and allow us to integrate to support that process, allow us to do the hard work effectively. At DocuSoft, we never lose sight of the fact that people will be using the software that can either make their job easier or hard, boring or fun, satisfactory or frustrating, which makes it important to deliver products that are user-friendly or even aesthetically pleasing. It's important to us that a claims management system dashboard looks good on the screen, that it really looks the part and can keep pace with market changes such as Blueprint 2. The bottom line is it has to be effective, but the best technology also has a sharp aesthetic that makes it a pleasurable experience. That's why everyone at DocuSoft is encouraged to be creative, to think outside the box and work with our customers in the same manner.